Happy February. Sorry, 1 second. Something's popping up. What just happened? Sorry, hang on. There we go. Okay. Too many things open on my MacBook. Happens all the time. All right, so let's get started, everybody. It's 8 o'clock. Happy February, ladies. What a great way to kick off the month by chatting with Jodi Picoult about her newest release, Wish You Were Here. A few quick thank yous before we start. As always, thanks to Jennifer Crowley for all she does for the group. A special thank you to Jodi's publicist, Debbie Aroff, for helping us to coordinate the chat with Jodi. Debbie is a member of the group and has worked with us on a few other authors as well. So big thanks to her. Thanks to all the moms who have already read the book and are recommending it to their friends and family, or are perhaps tuning in to our YouTube page after the fact because you couldn't join us live. Last but not least, of course, we want to thank Jodi for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with the Peloton Moms Book Club. So for those who don't know Jodi, I don't know how that's possible, but just in case, Jodi has published 28 novels, accompanying short stories, and many of you may not know that she has written several issues of Wonder Woman. In addition, she has written 2 young adult books with her daughter, Samantha. I have questions about that. Approximately 40 million copies of your books are in print worldwide. That's just an astounding number. Your books have been translated into 34 languages, and I believe your last 8 have debuted on the number one spot on the bestseller list. It is an absolute honor to chat with you tonight. So thank you so much, Jodi, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we always like to kind of start our chats asking our authors a little bit about your path that led you to becoming a writer. And I believe one of your first stories was written when you were 5 years old. So did you always know from such a young age that you wanted to write, or did you have aspirations of doing something else and circle back?
I loved writing. I was, I think I was a kid who read really, really early. I was reading when I was like 3.5. And I remember like a huge day was when I could sign my name and get a library card. That was a big deal for me. And I was writing books and illustrating them. And the one that you're talking about, I was 5 years old. It was called The Lobster That Was Misunderstood. And not that long ago, my mom showed me this copy, which she still has. So I'm quite sure we'll never see that in print, but it was really cute. And I never thought that anyone could actually be a writer. I'd never met a real writer. I never met anyone who made a living as a writer. So it wasn't really a career path for me. But I loved writing, and I had a lot of really devoted teachers. I went to a public school, and I had a lot of teachers who knew that I liked writing and really encouraged me to keep writing. And when I was getting ready to go to college, it was in the 80s. And they didn't have too many undergraduate creative writing programs then. They were all master's programs. But Princeton had a really great undergrad creative writing program. And you could work with real live, living, breathing authors. And I tried to get in there, got in, and got accepted into the creative writing program. And I worked almost exclusively with a writer named Mary Morris, who I still think is the reason that I am where I am today. She taught me everything that I know. And if not for her, I wouldn't be a writer. And when I was graduating from college, I still didn't think I was going to be a writer, but I had a short story that was bought by 17 magazine at the end of my junior year. And then they bought another one my senior year. And I remember calling my mom and saying, I'm going to be a writer. And she said, that is so great. Who's going to support you? And it was a good lesson, because all of these friends of mine who were English majors were going out and getting jobs as editorial assistants or, in publishing. And I didn't do that. I actually worked on Wall Street when I graduated. I cannot even balance a checkbook, but they wanted someone who could write the bond offering circulars that were given to Standard & Poor's and Moody's to rate companies. And so that was basically my job. I worked at a finance company, and I was writing these 200-page documents about different companies. And that was in 1987. I only worked there for 3 months because the stock market crashed. It was phenomenal because I hated the job. And I wound up going to Massachusetts and getting a job as an editor at a business textbook company, getting a master's in education, teaching 8th grade English, getting married, getting pregnant. Like I still kept, I was still writing the whole time, but I wasn't doing it for a living. And it was after I had my first child, my son, that the agent that I had spent that time getting sold one of my books, and it was published right, I think it was right after he was born. And after that, I just kept writing, and I never went back to teaching because it's way harder than writing.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's a classroom. It's just a bigger classroom when you're a writer. But
Right.
Teaching 8th grade English is, God bless anyone who does it.
Well, I'm sure we have some teachers on here tonight.
Yeah.
So it's a one of the most important jobs out there, and it's often thankless. So thank you to any
Absolutely.
of our teacher mamas who are joining us tonight or after the fact. So, you've had a lengthy career, and, that's a lot of novels that you've written. How do you think your writing has changed or evolved over the years? And see what I did there? Because we're going to talk about evolution in a minute.
That's a really good question. And I have a really interesting answer for that, because I have not been, Random House is my publisher, my beloved publisher right now, but I haven't been with them forever. I've bounced around between a lot of different publishing companies. And at one point, when I was at Simon and Schuster, I had some earlier books that had never come out in paperback because the sales were really modest and there was really no need for it. And my editor said to me, we want to reprint these in paperback. Here, take a look at them and make any changes you want. And that was a really interesting thing to do, because like at that point, I've been writing for about, 7 or 8 years. And to go back and read your first book, you're like sitting there going, oh, should I have written that? Or what would I have changed? And what I can tell you is that I stood by all the stories and all the characters. Like I wouldn't have changed a thing about those early books. The one thing I've gotten better at, and I think I've continued to get better at, is the actual technical craft of writing. So for example, where it might have taken me a paragraph to describe something 25 years ago, now I can do it in 5 really concentrated words. So I've become a better editor, and I think a better craftswoman. But I think that if you're born a storyteller, you're a storyteller.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's interesting because we recently chatted with what author was it? Oh, about Flicker in the Dark, and her edits. She was talking about how she was too verbose, and it was her first novel. So that's really interesting feedback that you learned to really kind of still convey the message you want to convey, but maybe in fewer words, which is often, I think, a good thing as far as keeping the reader engaged, if you will. So, all right, so let's jump into Wish You Were Here.
Great.
Love. First of all, one of our moms wanted to know, and before we jump into the actual book, love the cover.
Yeah.
And can you just talk a little bit about, is this a finch or is it?
I like to think it is.
Okay.
I mean, maybe not a finch, maybe a mockingbird. If you've read the book, you know why.
Yes.
But I actually get cover approval. I get pictures of what they're thinking of, and I get to make suggestions and pick from different incarnations of a cover. But usually the art department at Random House just knocks it out of the park. And they were the ones that came up with this image. And I just thought it was so cool and different from anything I've been seeing on books recently. That really just kept drawing my eye. So I'm going to pretend it's a mockingbird. I don't know if it is.
Okay. And then I'm assuming it's resting on some of the volcanic rock.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
I kind of love the way it's like when you look down at it, it's a little bit, you can't really tell what it's on. It feels a little, almost dreamlike, which works quite well for the book.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right. And then before we jump into that, also, did you have any say in your narrator for the Audible version?
Yeah, it's interesting. They always ask me if I have any Is there someone you're thinking of in particular? And if I'm not thinking of someone in particular, they usually give me a couple of different choices. And, it's funny, you wouldn't think that you have a real sense of what a character should sound like, but you do. Like some of the narrators they gave me were very, they sounded almost too young, and I needed Diana to have a certain sense of self and confidence in where she was headed. So she just like, I could tell immediately at first, listen, oh no, that's not the right person. So I know that Maren Ireland has done a great job. I haven't listened to the whole thing, but she's a terrific narrator.
Yes, I chose to read and not listen to this one, so I haven't heard it, but a lot of people were raving that she did a fantastic job. So somebody just finished it. Okay, so let's jump in. You chose to take on the pandemic. That probably, I have to imagine that wasn't necessarily the easiest decision for you, because maybe we're still in it, right? I guess it's not over. So It had to have been a little bit difficult, writing about something that's so present day and people are so, still recovering from and, just dealing with on the day to day. So at what point did you start the novel? And I guess talk a little bit about the thought process of involving such a important.
This is a book that I was not contracted to write. This was a book I never wanted to write. This is a book that I wish I didn't have to write. Right. When the pandemic started, I felt completely like overturned. I was a mess. If you've read the author's note or listened to the author's note, you know that I have asthma. I was really scared. I'm still scared. I was just downstairs listening to the news, hearing all the mask mandates that are going away and thinking, okay, this is going to be interesting, and as vaccinated as I am, I still don't know. I don't know what'll happen if I catch this, and I'm sure I will one day, so it's still a little scary for me. And I felt very undone by the pandemic because my life was very circumscribed in terms of going out on book tours. I had a big year planned for 2020. A musical adaptation of Between the Lines, which is one of the YA books I wrote with my daughter, was planned for April of 2020. And I'll let you guess what happened. But it obviously didn't pass. And, and that was a huge devastation. It was a real disappointment for me. And when I went into lockdown on March 12th, I was in lockdown. I didn't leave my house for 15 months. My husband did all the grocery shopping. Yeah. I didn't do anything except I would hike. I would hike in New Hampshire because we don't have anything up here but deer, and I would just go out 8 miles a day, just hiking in the hills because I had to leave my property or I'd go crazy. But I wasn't doing what I normally do. I wasn't connecting with fans. I wasn't going out and researching books. It was, for someone who works at home, it was much more upsetting than I thought it was going to be. And I had been contracted to write a book with another author, a wonderful author named Jenny Boylan, a book that we were going to start working on sometime in September of 2020, because that was when our schedules were going to line up. And she contacted me in March and she said, I don't know about you, but my schedule just cleared. And so we sat down, we plotted this book. I started doing as much research as I could on Zoom. We wrote the book together. We finished the book. It's a great draft, sent it off to our editor. And at that point, we still had no vaccine. I was still locked down and I was still completely lost. And I had been thinking a lot about how artists were going to chronicle the pandemic, because I do think it's the job of an artist to do that. Mm-hmm. And even Jenny and I, when we wrote our book, immediately pushed it back. Every author is doing that now. You either have to figure out, did your story happen pre-pandemic? Did it happen post-pandemic? If it's post, you better talk about the pandemic. So we were, I felt so bad leaving my characters at the end of this book thinking, they don't know what's coming.
Right.
3 months from now,
they're about to get hit by a bus.
Right. So, we finished this book. It's off my plate. And I'm thinking about how we're going to tell the story of the pandemic. And then I had heard a news story that was real about a man who got stranded in Machu Picchu. He was a tourist and the site shut down basically. And unlike all the other tourists, instead of going home, he decided to stay. And he stayed in the village. He wound up teaching martial arts to kids. He became part of the community. And months later, the community petitioned the government to open up Machu Picchu for him so he could have this private dawn viewing of this beautiful site, which nobody ever gets. And, presumably after that, he eventually went home. But it made me really wonder what it would be like to be in paradise when the rest of the world had gone to hell.
Right.
And I immediately thought, well, never been to Machu Picchu. Certainly not going there now. Where have I been that's on everyone's bucket list? And many, many years ago, I'd taken my kids and my husband down to the Galapagos, and it was a great family vacation. And I thought, I think I could work with that. I also managed to find a young man who, like this guy at Machu Picchu, was stranded on Isabella Island for months. I'm really good at hunting people down on the internet, and I stalked him until he answered me. And not only was he doing interviews with me on Zoom, but all the people who helped him and became his friends and basically his surrogate family on Isabella were doing interviews with me as well, so that I could get the research that I needed for the book. And to be honest, it wasn't until I started writing the book that I remembered, oh, right, Galapagos, seat of evolution. And all of a sudden, every now and then when you're a writer, something beautiful falls into your lap that you're not expecting. And that was the perfect thing, because, the whole point of Darwin's theory of evolution is that a species under great stress is either going to die out or it's going to evolve. And I cannot think of a better way to describe 2020.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So,
Yes.
the perfect metaphor for what I was trying to write. And so basically I wanted to write about what happens when the world that you're living in is not one that you recognize anymore. Because I think that's where we all were when I was writing this book. I wrote the book in 2 months. I started it in December of 2020, and I finished it at the end of January. And I was not planning to publish this. I gave it to a couple of friends to read, and they said, you should probably send this to your editor. And I was writing it really as therapy for me. Right. And the reality was I had no control over my life, but I had control over Diana's, and I needed that at that moment. And I wound up, literally, I sent an email to my editor, and it said surprise in the subject line. And I attached this manuscript, and she wrote me back and said, we have to publish this, which is why you wound up getting a bonus book for me, and you're going to get one again this fall. So that's how this book came to be. It was really, this is my extended therapy experiment. And
did it help?
It helped at the time that I was writing it. Like I said, I had so little control over myself and over my future that being able to play God for someone fictional really helped me.
Yeah.
It still didn't get me a vaccine any sooner, I'll tell you that.
Right. So I felt like, the second on the first page, you've captured the readers instantaneously by just naming the date, March 13th, yeah. 2020. And instantly, I think every reader forever will remember what that date means to them, what their personal reaction was on that day, their perception of what we were entering into. And Diana and Finn, are set to take this trip to the Galapagos, and Finn chooses obviously to, stay at the front lines. And that was a monumental decision for them, that he encouraged her to continue to take the trip and she chose to go. Because obviously, is it fair to say that they probably didn't realize the extent of what they were saying, at the time?
Do you remember being told this is going to be 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's temporary. It's 2 weeks. Our kids will be back in 2 weeks. Right. No problem.
My poor son and his fiance wound up, they lived in DC at the time in a tiny apartment, and they came up to lock down at a lake house, like 40 minutes away from our house that we own. And they brought 2 weeks of clothing, and they stayed until May.
Yeah.
So, it was ridiculous. That's what we were told. One of the reasons I wanted to write this book is because we have already forgotten so much from the beginning. We forgot how we were told it was going to be 2 weeks. We forgot back when we were told, don't wear masks. We forgot what it's like to leave our mail out for 48 hours because we thought there were germs on them that we were going to bring into the house? What about washing your broccoli with soap and water when you brought it home from the grocery store? Like, we were living in this crazy vacuum where no one knew what this actually was. And I wanted to capture those early days of, of utter zaniness and fear, because we really didn't know how this was going to come at us and in what direction. To have Finn stay in the hospital was not even a choice I made. That is what happened to residents. And I did a lot of interviews with people in the medical profession, and especially with young residents who were in their first years and who were taken. There were no, you're a surgical resident, there's no more surgeries. You're taken off and you're stuck in a COVID ward in an ICU. And this happened to everyone I spoke with. I do want you to just take a moment and think about all of those surgical residents who did not get that year of training, who you will be going to in the next few years. So good luck with that. I mean, there's a lot we haven't processed yet. But he would have been told to stay behind. He would not have been allowed to leave, as the others were not allowed to leave. And I needed to put Diana in a situation, because Diana has got such a direct laser focus and plan that she had to be completely overwhelmed. And so to wind up, without her luggage, in a place where she doesn't speak the language, without a place to stay, I just sort of wanted to strip her of all the comfort that she could have, so that I was leaving her, literally at ground zero.
Yes. And so that was one of our moms had a question. Laura Beth had wanted to know about, how you got all of your information as it related to the front lines, because it was so, detailed, from, the treatments and the procedures and the medicines, and just the details about, ultimately what was causing people to pass. So that couldn't have been easy to get that information during the pandemic either, just, as a human being, like, to hear all of that.
I mean, everything I did was on Zoom, right? So obviously that was how I stayed safe. What amazed me was how many doctors who, let's be real, they were still in the thick of this, right? And they made the time to talk to me, because they wanted so badly for their stories to be told. And I will say that I did the least writing in Finn's emails. I literally copied verbatim what these people told me, because I couldn't have said it more honestly or more painfully. Most of them cried on the phone with me. They were devastated because they were exhausted and they were threatened and they were scared. And after giving and giving and giving for so many months, to then walk outside and see people who aren't, taking COVID seriously, or who are yelling at them because they're, they believe that you have to be masked, or they're saying vaccines are good, or they won't give you ivermectin, or whatever it is, to be a medical professional right now has got to be the most debilitating job in the world.
Yeah. Well, and I think there was that scene that I'm sure was referenced as a true life experience, but I think Finn was referenced, he was grabbing a cup of Starbucks or whatever. Yes, and, and the barista was like,
Yeah, right. And actually the one that broke my heart was this young man who was a resident at Mass General in Boston, actually. And he was talking about how he had to stop talking to his father, because his father only watches Fox News and was an ardent Trump supporter, and just kept saying, this is fake news, this isn't real. And he's like, literally he's having phone calls with him with his phone in a plastic bag, wearing full PPE, and he's like, it's real. And I think they felt like they were fighting against an incoming tide, because they didn't have even the government support backing them up to say, this is real, take this seriously, let us help you. And that broke my heart. I mean, I can't imagine, making the decision to not talk to your father for months because it's just ruining your mental health.
Right. Crazy. And then I think you referenced a scene where the chief of the ER. They were getting supplies and they were expecting the masks, and then it was gloves, and he breaks down
Yeah.
and sobs because I'm
Yeah.
sure he knows that that's just putting his people in even more
Yeah.
danger.
That actually happened at a hospital of someone I spoke with in Canada.
Yeah, so crazy. So let's segue to Diana for a minute. That was some heavy topics.
Yeah.
So Diana's life up until March 13th was completely centered around art, right? It's in her genes. And so first of all, do you have any ties to art? Because obviously you had some really detailed knowledge in there, or was that all research as well?
Oh, it's all research. I can draw okay, but I know nothing about art. However, remember I told you about that, my son and his fiance who were isolating up by us? Well, his fiance was an art history major and has worked in the art world. And I said to her, this is it. I need your help. And I knew that I knew I wanted Diana to be involved in the art world. I knew I wanted her to not be an artist herself for reasons that have to do with her mother and distancing herself from her mom. I knew that I wanted Impressionism to be important because I loved the idea that, again, the metaphor that when you, and it's in the book when she talks about the first time her dad takes her to see a painting, but that when you look at an Impressionist painting up close, it's just a lot of blots of color and blurriness. It's not until you move back that you see what you're looking at. And I think that's a very good metaphor for COVID and this time in general. I think 5 years from now, we're going to look at the past few years in a very different way. And we don't have that distance yet. We're just starting to get it. So I wanted that to be important. And so I said to her, okay, I want to create a fake painting, and we're going to give this painting a provenance. And she was like, I'm on it. And she went off and was like, okay, so I think it should be Toulouse-Lautrec, and here's why. And I just loved the way she found all these details about, this guy who was so cognizant and based his work on the difference between what you show to the public and what is in your heart, what's your private self. And how that would manifest in a couple that was famous, like, Kitomi and her husband, who are, of course, fake Yoko and John. And, and I really wanted that. I wanted that sense of the dichotomy between what is real and what is not real, because obviously that becomes very important in the book.
Well, yeah, and that was going to be one of my questions. I mean, it seems like it was an obvious reference, but I just wanted to make sure that you had done that with Yoko and John. But I personally loved this piece of the story, and the role that the painting played and how attached, she really was to the painting, Kitomi. And am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Her struggle to let go, and right. So that obviously symbolizes her love, of her lost husband. And, I think it also symbolizes what a lot of us are going through, right? Like our life as we know it will never be the same. And I think a lot of people to this day are struggling with what, the new normal is and what life looks like now. And, it was really interesting to me too, that I think this particular painting was so different than his other work, or
right. Because
it was like still and muted, and it wasn't the big, bold, vibrant colors, right? And so that's a little bit too, I think, about life in the pandemic, right? Everything became muted and dull, and you lost,
Right. And it actually fits in really well with Toulouse-Lautrec's real series called, he did a whole series of paintings in this brothel where he lived. And he would do these pictures of like the prostitutes who were, getting their health checks. There's a really famous one that is in the Met that I just did a photo shoot with, where it's one of the sex workers and she's just staring at herself in the mirror the way all of us sometimes do in the morning, like, really, is this what I look like, and but there's a realism to it and a mutedness to it that it was really important in that series. And Lily is one of the most famous paintings from that series, and it shows two female prostitutes in bed with each other in a really quiet, cozy, intimate moment. And like, here are these people who put themselves on display for their clients, but the reality of their lives is under the covers, cuddled together in a same-sex relationship. And it's really beautiful, and so to take that one step further and to show a false painting that shows Toulouse-Lautrec himself with the woman who was likely his mistress and probably who gave him the syphilis that he died from, but to also show himself in that, in a way where his own deformity is not seen and where you don't see all of him, that all of that stuff is stuff that he played with in his actual work. And one of the things I love the most about this book is when people write me and they're like, I have been all over the internet and I can't find that painting. And I love saying that and saying, well, that's because it's not real.
Right. It's too bad though, because it would be awesome if
it would be a really cool painting. I don't know why he didn't think of it.
Yeah. So one of the other, I'm an English major, so one of the other references that I loved was that Gabriel named his daughter Beatrice, or Beatrix, and reference to Beatrice from Dante's Divine Comedy. So many similarities, obviously, between the pandemic and the Inferno. I'm sure that was not a mistake by you. That was intentional. Very
it's
intentional.
Even referenced in there when Gabriel says, that he names her Beatrice because you're willing to go through hell for her. That's literally the point of it.
Yeah, and that ultimately she's there. That was really did you always have that plan that she would save him, or was there to save him, like
Beatrice?
Yeah.
No, in fact, I wrote this book so fast that things kept popping up as I was writing it. And they usually say that writers are either pantsers or plotters, and so either you organize everything really, really carefully or you're just flying by the seat of your pants. I am not a pantser. I am a major plotter. But this book was coming so fast that I would be writing and things would evolve and I would have to jump back and seed them earlier in the text. So I had to keep doing that. And I knew that he was going to have a daughter. I didn't understand what her role was until she started cutting herself. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Where am I going with this? And then that all just, I was like, oh, wait, art therapy. Okay, I know what I'm doing. And then I had to keep on thinking in that direction. How not only was she going to save her very surly dad, but also how was she going to change Diana? How is she going to make Diana evolve?
Right. And so that's a perfect segue into kind of talking about how you wrote with your daughter, but also, being the mom of two teenagers during this, it's been particularly hard, I think it's hard for everybody, but watching two teenagers go through this has been particularly hard, I think. And I thought it was really interesting how you addressed, kind of her sexuality and exploring that, but then all of a sudden, that shuts down because everybody's got to go home. And she's isolated from that. And just some of the challenges that these teenagers are facing, and also the exposure that I think that they've had via social media during this kind of opening time, right, where they're learning about all these things, has come from social media as opposed to kind of that human interaction. And what is going to be that long lasting impact? And the thoughts that they're having now, are those really what their true feelings are, or are they being influenced, by social media right now? And I just wanted to chat a little bit about that because I found it really interesting that you worked on it.
One of the things, Beatrice is totally off social media because there's not enough internet to make it work. But if you ask me, you give me an age group and I will tell you what they lost during this pandemic. Everyone lost something. Everyone. And I think that was like that was another driving force for me to write this book, to say it is okay to grieve what you lost. Some people had the ultimate loss, the loss of a person, and that's, I can't imagine anything worse than that. But other people lost chunks of their life when they were sick. Other people lost jobs. Some people lost a vacation. Some people lost a wedding. Some people lost, in my case, an opening night for a musical I've been working on for 8 years, you know? I mean, everyone lost something. And, you know, teenagers definitely had it bad. I work with a group of teenagers in the theater community in New Hampshire, and we were scrambling our brains trying to find a way to keep them connected
Yeah.
and interacting with each other when we couldn't meet in person. And I have friends who have young children I had a friend who's a writer who said to me that her 5-year-old doesn't remember when kids were not masked at school. Right? You know, so everyone is like a mess. Everyone is a mess. Everyone's talking about, we're coming out of this, you know, and the rates are falling and we're past Omicron, and all of those are good things. We haven't even begun to see how this is all going to shake out. And we're feeling some of it already. I mean, I'm sure you guys are experiencing what we are, where, you know, like, you go to a doctor's office, and instead of there being a whole battery of receptionists there to help you schedule an appointment, there's one person and no one is scheduling appointments anymore. And, you know, the attrition rate in the medical community is astounding right now. Teachers are retiring in droves. My son is an educator. He's a 7th and 8th grade math teacher in California. He is terrified of getting sick because the janitor was filling in as a sub because they don't have subs, you know? So, I mean, honestly, we have not begun to even see what we will see, I think, over the next decade as the fallout of the COVID years, as they'll probably be known, or whatever. Yeah. It's going to be devastating. And yeah, I do think that kids, in some ways, having them isolated was terrible. In other ways, as much as I hate Zoom, thank God for Zoom, right? I mean, like, my kid he and his husband were living in California. I didn't see him for 2 years. I didn't see my parents for 2 years. They were in Arizona, you know, and if not for Zoom, I don't know, I would, well, I know what I would have done. I would have gotten in my car and I would have driven somewhere eventually, but, you know, but we all felt that loss. And at least technology was able to give us the illusion of being connected. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
But at least it gave us, you know, a moment of hope instead of complete isolation. You know, and the interesting thing, you know, for all that you're saying about kids being separated from each other, isolation, again, is also where evolution happens.
Right. Really interesting.
You know, isolation is both positive and negative.
Yeah. So interesting. All right. So one of our moms, this could be a teeny bit of a spoiler, I think. So I'm throwing it out there, everybody. One of our moms, M. Toole, would like you to talk about the role that dreams played in the novel. Do you view that dreams are a passage to another life? And most importantly, did Diana Gabrielle and Beatrice when she woke up?
Most importantly. Okay. So, you know, without giving everything away, what I will tell you is, in addition to interviewing medical professionals, I also interviewed over 40 people who had very severe cases of COVID and who were ventilated and survived. And I think it was like more than 90% of them had an experience of not just a dream, but almost a very tangible and extended hallucinatory experience. For some of these people, it lasted years, like in their mind. I remember there was one woman who told me that when she was on the ventilator, she didn't realize she was on a ventilator, and she experienced her daughter had a son, had like a 4-year-old son, and the son died, and her daughter was grieving. She was there with her through the funeral, and then her daughter wound up getting pregnant again and having twins, and, you know, like 2 years passed, I don't know, whatever. And when she was taken off the vent, her first thought was, what do I even say? How do I say to my daughter that I'm still grieving the loss of, you know, her grandson? And her daughter looked at her like she was crazy. And she said, he's right here. Do you want to talk to him? You know, he can get on the Zoom. And there were so many experiences like that, that I honestly began to like think, I am the only person on the planet who is actually cataloging that all of these people had the same kind of experience. Because honestly, there are really more important things we need to know about COVID right now. But I was like, wow, this is more than a coincidence.
Yeah.
You know, and so what I will say is that I do not know why. I don't think any of us know why neurologically people who are sedated that long or who are ventilated might have such lucid dream patterns. But they exist, and they are not just dreams to the people who have them. They are very, very real. And in the cases of some people, they last even post ventilation. Like they still feel like this is a part of them, like they've been there. They can, to them, this is very as real as whatever world they're living in.
Right. Amazing. Interesting. Fascinating.
And at the end, I'm not going to tell you the answer to that. Come on.
I didn't think we'd get it out of you. I figured I'd throw it out there. I told her I would. I'm like, I don't think she's going to answer that. All right. So with 28 novels, I have to ask, do you have a personal favorite?
Yeah, I do. My personal favorite is Small Great Things.
I do.
And, it's because I write a lot of books, and I write about a lot of very contentious issues. And I certainly have a lot of opinions, and I try really hard to balance different points of view. But that book really made me look at myself in a much deeper way than I ever had, and changed how I live my life and how I see the world. It really is, to me, it is a book about racism, but more so it's a book about white privilege, and acknowledging that having a face this color gives you a pathway through the world that some people don't have. Yeah. And I had never really thought about that before. And that, of course, is exactly what white privilege is. So doing the research for that book, and going to social justice workshops, and talking to racial justice educators, and meeting with groups of amazing Black women who helped me create the voice of Ruth, and then vetted her narrative in the book for me. They taught me so much about myself that I needed to do work on, and that I'm still doing work on, and that I hope that book encourages other people to do work on.
Well, that's only appropriate that we talk about that book, because it is Black History Month. So that's
that's right.
Perfect. Perfect suggested read if you haven't read it. It's my probably personal favorite of yours as well. But you do, I mean, you're all your novels, you certainly take on some really tough topics, and I think it takes courage to write about some of the topics you do. So I know for me, that's what I've always been drawn to your novels, because I'm like, okay, what's she going to take on now? This isn't, I know I'm not opening a book of fluff.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah. So just a couple more questions, and I know your time is precious, so we're getting there at 8:43, but do you think the world is ready for a screen adaptation of this book, or do you think
it better be, because it's happening?
Okay, well, that was my question. I didn't know if it was. But sometimes, that, as I've learned in talking to lots of authors these last 18 months, it takes a long time to get.
It does. It takes a long time, but the team behind this, Netflix has it, and the team behind it is a bunch of producers that are all women, which I think means it's going to get done. And they're really they get it. I had two producers who both wanted the rights to this, and instead of fighting, they were like, let's do it together. When does that ever happen in Hollywood, right? Yeah. So and they are moving swiftly. They got a screenwriter who is actually a novelist herself, who I've spoken with, and who is just she's very committed and very intrigued by it. They know that the clock is ticking, they want it to happen quickly. So I hope I get to see a draft really soon, but I know she's already writing it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Fantastic. Well, I didn't know that when I was asking the question, but I was like, I wonder if people are ready to, because it's coming, right? I mean, it's not going to be the first thing. I mean, it's going to be time to start.
the truth is that, like you said, I heard someone saying on here when I first logged on, I think it might have been you. I didn't think I was ready to read a book about COVID. I
Yeah,
got to tell you, that is the comment I get the most about this book. I was not ready to read a COVID book, but let me tell you, I'm glad I read this book.
I am. Yeah.
And that's the point of it. I think this book should leave you feeling validated for all the feelings you had over the past 2 years, and also leave you with a little bit of hope and understanding that what you've learned over the past 2 years about yourself counts, and that you get to carry that forward. And I think we all have learned some really important lessons about what matters the most and what doesn't.
Yep. Just like Diana, right?
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So this book's only not even 3 months old yet, but so what's next? Did you delay your book with Jenny?
No, I didn't. I slotted this one in really carefully.
So Jenny's
it's
coming
weird
next.
though, because this book came out, and like I think a month later, I was like, people at the publishing company were like, "Here's your ad copy for the next book," and I was like, "What? Didn't we just publish a book?" Yeah, I mean, my head was still full of Wish You Were Here, and I'm already doing Mad Honey stuff. The book is called Mad Honey. It's coming out on, I believe, October 11th. Deb, if I'm wrong, let me know in the chat. It is co-written with me and Jenny Boylan. It is so good. And I can say that because I wrote this book and then had to go back to Mad Honey, very fresh, to read it and to do my edits on Mad Honey. And I was like, man, I just forgot how good this one was. So I'm very, very excited for the world to get this. I think it's going to spark a lot of great conversations that we need to be having. It is about the secrets that we choose to keep from our past and why. It's about identity and authenticity. And it's good. It's just really, really good. You're going to like it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. We can't wait. Debbie.
Look at Debbie. There she goes.
She said it's October 11th, by the way. Well, that's very exciting. So we always like to end our chats by asking kind of what you're currently reading and recommending. So have anything that you want to share that you're loving?
So I just finished this weekend it's an advance. I get a lot of advance copies because I'm fancy that way. And also because I'm asked to blurb a lot of them. But I just finished reading Emma Straub's upcoming book called This Time Tomorrow, which is really good. It's really poignant, and I don't want to give anything away, but it will make you want to either call your mom or your child. Like you'll like it. It's good.
Okay.
And the book that I read over my vacation time in December, which blew me away, and I'm still raving about it. If you're looking for light and fluffy and fun, The Roughest Draft. It is written by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegemund Broca. I know, mouthfuls, but they are a married couple, and they're writing about co-writers who hate each other. It's a very, very funny book, and it's for someone, especially in publishing, it's great. It's called The Roughest Draft. And the other book that I would recommend, which is a little bit older, but not that old if you haven't read it yet, is We Are Not Like Them by Jo Piazza and Christine Pride. It's another really good read for February, for Black History Month, because it's really about having those very hard conversations with people who are not of the same race as you, and why you need to be having them.
Yes, we actually had the pleasure of chatting with them on Pub Day.
Oh, good.
That's a perfect book to read this month.
Yeah.
I love that suggestion. So that's fantastic. Yes, that's awesome. Well, thank you. This was really an honor. It's
My
like
pleasure.
talking to a legend. This was really super exciting, and love your book. Love all your books. Love the topics you cover, and we'll certainly look forward to the next one. Love to have you back. Love to help promote your book in any way we can, or all of your books in any way we can. So thank you so much for joining us, Jodi. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for reading the book. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.